So Christmas 1971, it was a bit of a lonely time. I was living in this big Victorian mansion, and my we called it Roach Manor. That was our name for it. And my two roommates were away. You know, Rob was away. Rob Howes was away with his girlfriend and her son and his two daughters. And our other friend, James Jackson, he was away visiting his parents in Alabama. And so I was there on my own, and it was a little bit lonely. And but at the weekend, my roommates came back because it was time to go back to work, and we had a little New Year's Eve party. That was kind of fun. And my old friend Miss Teller came to visit on the way to her party, and that was a little bit of a strain for me, 'cause she looked so beautiful, and just obviously we're no longer together. Anyway, so another thing that happened in that time between when I moved into Roach Manor and when I left for Georgia, the paperwork was going through so I would be loaned out from Cessna to Lockheed, Georgia, in Atlanta. That was going through, and I was waiting for that to happen. But what happened was my wife called and said, "You have to take Frankie." Frankie was our dog, our German Shepherd. This was rather a shock to me because it was really her dog. We got the dog because when we lived in this little old house in England on the edge of a golf course, which was away from other houses, we had had a peeping Tom incident while I was away at work, and from that, and the police came with their highly trained German Shepherds. We decided to get one for our protection, and especially for Pauline's protection. But anyway, Pauline called and said, "You have to take Frank." And I figured out later on that probably she had now found a boyfriend, and our German Shepherd was not going to have any of that nonsense. So this was fine by me. This was great, and I now had a companion, faithful companion. Yeah. And also, a very strange coincidence, if you want to call it a coincidence, it was just crossing of paths. I received a phone call one evening from a lady with a very nice sounding voice, and she was asking for Rob, my roommate. He was not there, and I explained it was that and said, "Tell me your name, and I'll give him the message." Right? And her name was Terry. It's now been my wife for many years, right? But I didn't know her at the time. And I had a date that evening, but she didn't show up. So next day I asked Rob, I said, who was this lady you called? Terry, And he said, "Oh, she was the girlfriend of my friend who was my roommate when I was at West Point, right? And she's a hot babe." I said, "Oh, okay, good." So I gave her a call, and we arranged to have a lunch date, and that turned out to be the day before I was leaving for Atlanta. So we went to lunch, and I was totally wired, ready to go off on this big adventure, and gulped my food down and stood up. It was I was a bit uncouth in those days, So I stood up, and Terry had barely touched her food. But we left the restaurant and went out across the street to this Century 2. It's a concert hall complex in Wichita. And in the grounds of Century 2 is this modern architecture piece made of stainless steel called the tripodal. It's a three-legged thing. And Terry and I kissed under that statue thing. And next day, I set off for Georgia with James. James was going to ride with me to Atlanta. He had a sister who lived in Atlanta. Her husband was an airline pilot there. and they would give me some hints on, where I should take up residence when I was working at Lockheed, Georgia. So we set off on the big adventure, and as we crossed the border into Oklahoma, James, in typical fashion, said, "Oh, we're hauling ass." So, and the instructions were simple enough to get to Atlanta in those days, was go down to Oklahoma City and make a left. That's what we did. And we'll hear more about that later.